For those of you who are joining us for the first time, you are very, very welcome. And we obviously look forward to welcoming you to future events. We're always delighted to welcome members, corporate members, and our season sponsors, obviously Odgers and Cardiff Metropolitan University, whose continued support is obviously greatly appreciated, particularly during this challenging time. I'd also like to welcome Alistair Milburn of Effective Communication and his team, who will now be working with the club moving forward on PR and related matters. So welcome to your team. In line with the normal format for the Zoom event, I'll shortly be introducing our guest speaker, during which time, if you can mute your microphones, that would be much appreciated. And then at the end of the formal presentation, we will be having a question and answers. So if you can send any questions to me direct using the chat option, that would be much appreciated. So now moving on to our guest speaker. Katherine Bennett CBE is a senior Vice President of Airbus and has been in the company for 16 years, leading the company's external engagement and strategy in the UK. Based out of London and Bristol, Katherine has specific responsibility for public affairs for all parts of the Airbus company, which employs over 14,000 people in the UK. Katherine's previous employment was with General Motors UK, where she headed up their government affairs function, and prior to that worked for Hill & Knowlton Public Relations in London, during which time apparently she and I met. Katherine was awarded the Order of Commander of the British Empire in January 2019 for services to the aerospace and aviation sector, which followed her OBE award in June 2004 for services to industry and charity. Katherine has served on various boards of public and private enterprises, focusing on economic development in UK regions, and is Vice President Aerospace on the Council of ADS, the UK Aerospace Trade Association. She serves on the board of the Aerospace Growth Partnership, part of the UK government's industrial strategy, the board of the French Chamber of Great Britain, and Wales Government Science and Innovation Council. In November 2019, Katherine was appointed as chair of the new Western Gateway, a cross-government local authority initiative which will aim to promote and maximise economic growth across South Wales and the west of England. In March 2020, following the COVID pandemic, Katherine took up the additional role of leading public affairs for a consortium, which includes Airbus, of UK manufacturers to turn around and deliver the urgent requirement to assist the UK government in their national task to provide medical grade ventilators to the NHS. In 2018, Katherine founded the UK's Women in Aviation and Aerospace Charter, which is committed to building a fair and balanced industry for women in this sector. Katherine holds many other important posts, but also manages to find time to be active in her local community in Wiltshire. She's a church organist, a member of the UK Parliament Choir, and founder of the Airbus Filton Choir. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Katherine Bennett CBE.
Well, thank you very much, Paul, and also thank you to Liz for assisting with setting up all the Zoom, etc. Delighted to be here. I'm sorry that we can't be together in person, but maybe another time we can all get together. And as Paul mentioned my interest in choral singing, I thought I'd just mention the fact that there is, of course, a Three Choirs Festival, and I mention that because you will see on the screen behind me some images of organisations with which I'm involved that mean a lot to me. And I'm focusing on three rivers tonight rather than three choirs. So as Paul just said, just over a year ago, I was asked to become chair of the Western Gateway, which is the newest economic powerhouse for the UK. One of the images that you'll see behind me is, of course, the Prince of Wales Bridge, now free to use and one of the catalysts for the reason for the powerhouse being established. So that's the first river in my story of three rivers. The second river is the River Avon, the source of which is in my village in North Wiltshire. I literally live off a road called Avon Rise. It's a place of peace for me and many of my neighbours and friends. And the third river in my story of the three rivers is actually the River Thames. When I work in London, which is most weeks, COVID permitting, I stay with a dear friend in Chiswick. Her house, her apartment is right by the river there, and you can never fail to be impressed by its huge power and importance and beauty, very near the centre of the capital city. Why on earth am I talking about rivers? I can probably guess you're saying. I'm not actually a nautical person. I was brought up miles away from the English or Welsh coastlines, but I am somebody who likes to reflect and learn a lot from the past, probably because I studied history at university. The key thing for me is the importance of rivers as one of many parts of transport which opens up communities and trade. Just like more 21st century infrastructure does, whether by train or road or, of course, aviation. In the very early days, rivers were fought over and often a barrier. But now, in the case of our area, the Western Gateway area, we have 2 Severn bridges and, of course, the rail tunnel. There was also the story I read about today, this summer, about Patriot yachts who said they might trial hydrogen-propelled boats as water taxis from Cardiff to Bristol. So, Paul, if that happens, maybe you and I can take a trip. Eartha Kitt once said, "The river is constantly turning and bending, and you never know where it's going to go and where you'll wind up. Following the bend in the river and staying on your own path means that you are on the right track, and don't let anyone deter you from that." Now, those of you who might know me will know that determination is certainly something you need to get on in life, but also, really importantly, endeavouring to follow the right track. So Paul asked me to touch on my career today and to comment on my current roles and responsibilities. So I will do that, continuing to use the Three Rivers theme. I was brought up in Surrey, so close to London. I was never really ever one of those people, and I'm quite envious of those people who knew what they wanted to do as children or young people. But I knew that I liked dealing with lots of topics, lots of variety. I'm quite an extrovert. So after university, I was very happy to land a role in a large international PR firm. The first ever client account I worked on was the Rugby World Cup in 1991. And I often tell a story of helping run a press event at Twickenham Stadium, where I wore very inappropriate shoes for being on a rugby pitch. And a certain gentleman who I'm looking at the moment was the star of this press event and won the place kicking competition. And here we are 30 years later. So after the glamour of dealing with international rugby players, I then moved to political relations and started work on various other clients, such as Nuclear Electric, RSPCA, and I also lobbied very hard on behalf of Vernon's Pools against the National Lottery. You can see how successful I was because, of course, the National Lottery is very much alive and kicking. I spent a short time working at the Corporation of London for the Lord Mayor of London, and then I moved, as Paul said earlier, to General Motors or Vauxhall Motors. And really, it was very eye-opening for me moving to work in-house. I learned about manufacturing, I learned about working with engineers, I learned a lot about customer relationships, and also, for me, and very poignantly, about businesses' role in the environment and the community in which they live. We've had some challenging times in the car industry, and they're still facing it now. But I do remember working really hard on persuading General Motors to invest in more facilities. I had to deal with company stakeholders from all around the UK. I was very pleased to help celebrate Vauxhall's centenary, which is a real milestone. And actually, whilst I was at Vauxhall, I did used to come once a year to Cardiff, to the university, to the School of Journalism, because I did a lecture in PR once a year, and I loved doing that. One of the difficult things I had to deal with, though, there at Vauxhall was the decision they made to close one of the car plants in Luton. And boy, did I grow up professionally during that experience. It was pretty hard. I was the main public face for the company. I remember being the sole company representative in a local community council meeting where, frankly, about 40 people were shouting at me. You had to keep a steady nerve, be determined, be calm, but also be responsive and sensitive to how they were feeling. After Vauxhall, I then moved to Airbus. So I then moved to my second river. And I'm now living in a rural village in North Wiltshire, as I said, by the River Avon. And I'm proud to have even more reasons to visit Cardiff. I love going to the Millennium Centre to hear the music. And of course, with my job role, I have to visit the Senate building. I've had some high points in the work I've done at Airbus, seeing the first flight of many new aircraft products. Obviously, my prime role has been to work with the governments, and we've had superb help from the government in Wales and, of course, the government nationally as well. And I believe my colleague Jerome Blandan, who's the site director for our site in North Wales, might be listening in tonight. If he is, hi Jerome. The site that he runs in Broughton, North East Wales, is really a jewel in Airbus's business, the jewel, you could say, in our industrial crown. Up at Broughton, we manufacture wings of all our commercial product range. We employ around 6,000 people directly. 60% of our staff live in Wales, and we spend around £500 million in the supply chain in Wales alone. And actually, Jerome's plant is the most efficient plant across the whole of Airbus's operations worldwide. I'm particularly proud as well of our story on training and young people. Over the years, we've estimated that we've trained 4,100 apprentices over the last decade. I'm very proud to say that graduates and apprentices have continued to be employed by Airbus even this year. We've made a real effort on that. And I would like to do a shout out for our apprentice programme, because our apprentices often go on to actually get a degree with no student debt. So maybe something worth encouraging your children or friends' children to think about. Our other site in Wales is run by another very dear colleague, Karen Thomas. I think she might be on the call as well today. She lives in Newport, but she also runs our site in Newport. And our site in Newport employs around 500 people, and it is the Airbus's global cyber innovation hub, and it delivers fixed and deployable communications. It works really closely with academia and other cyber businesses in our area. There's the Endeavour Wales Research Programme. We work closely with Cardiff University and, of course, Swansea University. And I have to say, links with universities are absolutely key. So the role I undertake at Airbus, I'm the main external facing person for the company across all our businesses. I humbly try and call myself the ambassador of Airbus. Of course, Airbus has been in the news quite a bit over the last few years on the topic of Brexit. As you may know, we decided to make a very active intervention on our views on this topic. I won't go into it too much, but on a personal basis, it's been pretty stressful at times. I had to do a fair number of media interviews, and one of the images that you might see behind me at some period of time is when I actually appeared on Andrew Marr's show. I was absolutely terrified, didn't sleep a wink all night the night before, but he was very charming to me. And clearly, I think they want to be quite kind to business people rather than the politicians he usually grills on a Sunday morning. I had a very nice thing happen after I did that interview, though. A random stranger, a lady I don't know, emailed me about an hour later to say she was watching Andrew Marr doing her ironing, which she usually does on a Sunday morning. And she just wanted to say how proud she was to see a female businesswoman in front of the cameras like that. And I just love it when things like that happen. So in terms of other activities at Airbus, my team and I have had to deal with quite a lot of high profile visits, prime ministers visiting, having to manage the politics when you have the prime minister and the first minister of Wales at a visit. There's a great quote I use a lot from the Times newspaper, that Airbus is politics with wings on it. Aerospace is a very popular business to have in a nation's economy. And, you know, believe you me, I spent some time working in Airbus's head office in Toulouse, and many governments come knocking on their door. But of course, I can't speak to you today virtually because we're not together, but I can't speak to you today and not mention COVID-19. It's been such a serious crisis for many sectors, hospitality, creative industries, but of course, aviation and aerospace. And I know, my heart goes out to Cardiff Airport just down the road. I hope they survive well. You think about the fact that the whole sector, the aviation sector worldwide, employs 30 million people. And as our CEO said the other day, this is the most severe crisis our sector's ever faced. Worldwide flights are down by 70%, 70%. 6,500 aircraft are grounded. So we estimate, fingers crossed, the vaccine story comes to fruition, and that by 2025, we estimate that our business will be back to pre-COVID levels. But in the meantime, we've had to make some very difficult announcements. We've had to reduce our headcount across the world, including 1,700 jobs here in the UK, and hats off to the colleagues who've had to deal with those tricky issues. I've even lost a couple of members of my own team as a result of these cutbacks, but I'm actually delighted that one of my team has moved to a new role as a result of these changes, and that's Helen Swift, who's also on the call today. She lives in Torfaen and is now the Public Affairs Manager for Wales, so hopefully you may see her at future events. One other activity that Airbus got involved with during COVID-19 crisis in the summer was building ventilators. Who would ever have thought that aerospace companies, automotive companies, Formula One companies would be able to come together and build ventilators? Well, we certainly did, under the leadership of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. And I'm very proud to say that the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, which is right next to Jerome's plant in Broughton, was actually the production line for part of the ventilators. They produced 17,000 ventilators for the NHS. An amazing initiative. People got together, worked really quickly, worked over their weekends. They were passionate about it. Apart from the difficulties that COVID has caused Airbus, we actually, of course, want to look at the future. So one of the big things we've done last September was to launch what we call the Zero E concept. And this is doing our bit to deal with the net zero challenges. We've announced that we're launching some concept aircraft, a number of configurations, lots of work to be done, lots of research to be done, but potentially we're looking at these aircraft using hydrogen. So we look forward to keeping you informed on how that goes. R&D is absolutely key, and our site in Filton near Bristol is where our engineers work, designing the amazing wings that are built up in Broughton. And for me, one of the key messages I want to do with any speech I do is to encourage young people to think about aerospace as a career, because with visions like Zero E, we certainly think it's a good career to go into. As Paul also mentioned, I do quite a lot of focus on gender diversity, and I was very proud to have founded the charter along with many other enthusiastic people. And this was announced 2 years ago at the Farnborough Air Show, and we now have over 200 companies who've signed up to that. So on to my final river. So the final river, of course, is the River Severn. So the Western Gateway was founded just over a year ago. The launch event was held at the Celtic Manor, so on the right side of the bridge, some of you may say. It's come about as a result of organic growth. Cardiff and Bristol are huge, very strong city regions. And actually the catalyst, in a way, to get the powerhouse launched was the abolition of the tolls on the 7 bridges. And then this amazing thing started. 10 years ago, we'd seen the Northern Powerhouse launched. 4 years ago, there was the Midlands engine launched. And now it's the turn of our areas. Of course, I'm totally aware that it's slightly a political hot potato. The relationship between the Welsh government and the UK government sometimes can be tricky. As a business person, I do my best to keep out of that debate. And I have had nothing but support from many, many organisations. We've got 8 cities, 3 city regions, 2 airports, 9 ports, 10 universities and 7 research councils in the Western Gateway area. So it spreads including Wiltshire, Swindon, Gloucestershire, Bristol, South Gloucestershire, Bath, and then of course into Wales, Cardiff, Newport, Swansea, and really importantly, the Cardiff city region. I've had huge amount of support from the Welsh local authorities. Hugh Roberts, the leader of Cardiff Council, is one of the key supporters. And I'm very pleased to be working, of course, with the other leaders, Councillor Jane Mudd in Newport as well, a really important supporter. In fact, this topic is very much in my mind because literally this morning I was in front of the Business Select Committee at the House of Commons talking about levelling up, which is a phrase we hear a lot about now. But more importantly, as well as local authority support, is working with LEPs, is working with businesses and working with those 10 universities I mentioned. And I'm very proud that Vice Chancellors from all of our universities have pledged support to help us. And it's universities such as Cardiff, such as Bristol, which are in the top tier of universities worldwide that will help inward investment come to our area. So there's nothing like a free dinner. And of course, we're not having a dinner tonight, but I am on the hunt for business leaders to come and join me in this endeavour. We're looking for 2 business leaders, business people, representatives, could be any size business, to come and join the partnership board of the Western Gateway. So if you're interested, I'm sure that Cardiff Business Club can put you in touch with me and the Secretariat. So one of the key points about the powerhouse, what's it all about? Is it another tier of government? Well, I have got quite a big day job. So really I'm doing the Western Gateway because for me, I think business can make a difference. So the key role I see is an amplification role. We can be a wider voice to help attract inward investment. There are many cross-border things that we can work on together. We're not a delivery vehicle. There's plenty of other organisations better equipped to do that. I feel that business leaders such as myself can play a huge role in encouraging inward investment. I have a huge theory that business follows business. So the key points that we're focusing on for the Western Gateway, as I said, it's only been going a year, so please be patient, is connectivity, looking at transport, global gateway, thinking about the river, opening up the trade links as it did in the past. We should be working together to attract companies to come and invest. And really importantly, innovation. I've already touched on our cyber expertise, the digital expertise, the net zero opportunities, harnessing the power of the river in terms of prospects such as some of the tidal power projects. So let's build on the trade routes that Cardiff played a huge part in years ago and continues to play. So I'm very keen for businesses such as those of you on the call today to come and get involved. But to conclude, and with my river theme, I thought I would find the best river one-liner or joke that I could find. And I thought this one was quite appropriate in light of the recent US election fun and games and the approach of the media. So President Lyndon B. Johnson once said, "If one morning I walked on top of water across the Potomac River, the headline that afternoon would read, 'President can't swim.'" Thank you very much.
Thanks, Katherine. Paul, can you unmute your speaker, please?
Lovely. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure, like me, you found that fascinating, not only in terms of where Katherine has got to, but the journey that it started from. And I think it's always encouraging for youngsters who are entering the world of work to hear from somebody who didn't really have any idea about what their career aspirations were, but certainly you've been at the heart of many of the leading industries across the globe, automotive, obviously, and now aerospace. But I was obviously intrigued that, Katherine, you started off in the world of rugby at a time when rugby itself was changing and just about to enter in the world of professionalism. I'm glad you mentioned that particular moment at Twickenham, because that's the only time I ever had success. Much of my visits sadly ended in a hammering. Anyway, fascinating talk. You've obviously been through some challenging times, Katherine, in the last 12 months in particular with the pandemic. I've now got some questions starting to come in. So I'm going to ask the first one. So this is from David Ainsworth. Do you see a permanent change required in your business model given COVID-19? Or is it more a short-term change and you expect that your business proposition will be the same in the longer term? And linked to that, do you think the demand for high-capacity planes will reduce as people may start to work more remotely in the new normal now that we are used to it?
So our business covers more than commercial aircraft. I perhaps should have explained that a bit more clearly. We're also in the defence and space business and our helicopter business, all of which we hope will continue to thrive. And actually, those parts of our business has been continuing to work as normal. Commercial aircraft requirements, of course, have come to a bit of a sort of, it's been a slowdown. It's not stopped, it's been a slowdown. Now, if we were speaking this time last year, I would have been talking about the huge order book we've got. So the key thing for us is that we actually have continued to deliver aircraft, and we very much hope that we will be able to continue delivering aircraft and actually then be able to ramp up to the rates near to where we were before. But of course, we need our airlines, our customers, to continue to want to receive those aircraft. We have pretty tight contracts with them, but we've tried to be very flexible and work with them. But yes, there will be changes in the way we operate our business. I'm sure this is true with many other companies as well. People have learned to work more virtually. Our engineers have been able to design more virtually. But in the factories, you need people working on site. And I'm extremely proud of the work that has been done at our sites throughout the UK in response to COVID, with the necessary safety requirements that have gone in. It's an amazing story to hear, and it's done very quickly and very professionally done. There will probably be some changes in terms of what you ask about high capacity aircraft. I just want to say, for those of you thinking about flying, please do. We hear the government announced today that they're changing the quarantine situation, where you can maybe quarantine just for 5 days after the 15th of December. Just to reassure you that it is extremely safe to fly in an aircraft. We have a filtration system which is run by HEPA filters, and the air in the aircraft changes every 2 to 3 minutes. So it's pretty safe. Obviously, we're working very, very closely with our airport partners as well to make the whole flying experience good. But of course, going back to high capacity aircraft, there's the A380 aircraft, one of the most iconic aircraft ever flying. Sadly, we're not producing them anymore, but they will be seen in the skies again, very popular with some of our customers, particularly Emirates, who have a particular business model, and we'll continue to work with them. But there's other aircraft as well, the A350 long range aircraft, and we're working closely with our airlines on the necessary requirements and configurations. So there will be changes, but change can be a good thing.
Okay, I have a question here now from Richard. I don't know your surname, sorry. This is related to Brexit, which has been overshadowed in many respects with the pandemic. His question is, Airbus took a certain position on Brexit. Now Brexit is a given. Do you think the Airbus position has changed for UK investment? And do you feel the Airbus position on Brexit ever damaged the company's reputation?
So the key thing we always endeavoured to say when we decided to speak up on the topic was that it's important for our UK sites to remain competitive and continue to produce the aircraft and do the design work that they do so well. So as I said earlier, Broughton is the jewel in the crown of Airbus's operations worldwide, and long may it continue. So that's the most important thing. What we wanted to say, get the message out, was that we like the fact that aerospace is a very integrated business. We work across borders all the time. Our wings get delivered to France or Germany or Spain. Our people work in many different countries. As I mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to go and work in France for a few years, and I don't want my successors not to have that opportunity. Now, and the other key thing for us is that we do operate a slightly just-in-time delivery system in terms of our supply chain, not quite as acute as the car industry, but pretty close. And we didn't want hold up at the border to make the UK business seem unhelpful and uncompetitive and not deliver the aircraft. But in terms of whether it affected Airbus's image, there's probably lots of different views on that. We certainly made a noise. It was challenging at times. Personally, a number of us came in for big attacks from people on the other side of the debate. But I have to say the government at all times were very professional. Their door was very much open. We had very good dialogue with the government. And, as the questioner said, we do all have to move on now.
Yeah. Thanks, Catherine. I've got one here from John Union. You mentioned obviously the Western Gateway and the work that you and colleagues are doing on that. What is the relationship between Cardiff and Bristol airports and their involvement with the Western Gateway?
I've had a lot of dialogue with Bristol Airport. They've got their challenges in terms of planning infrastructure questions, and of course want to help very much in terms of inward investment and encouraging more trade. I'll let the airport speak for themselves about their relationship with each other. From an Airbus perspective, we've had a lot of dealings with Cardiff Airport, but obviously they're run under very different operations, and I wish both organisations well. As I said, we want to get people flying again.
Yeah, thank you. I have one here then from Michael Baker. Can you ask Catherine what lessons does she think her industry needs to learn from the Boeing 737 MAX situation?
Well, our CEO said many months ago when this issue first occurred, safety is absolutely the #1 topic for anyone working in any advanced manufacturing industry. And in many ways, we completely felt for Boeing engineers, and any engineers are fascinated about what they do, their ingenuity, they want to solve problems. So I believe the FAA have now given approval for the 737 MAX to fly again. And of course, Airbus has worked, kept an eye on what's happened there, any lessons learned. But believe you me, the work that goes into designing and testing our aircraft is incredible. It takes several years. It's quite an expensive process. And we all need to move together to ensure that safety continues to be the #1 priority.
Great. I've had a little note here from Spencer Burns of Cardiff Airport.
Oh, hi,
In
Spencer.
relation to the previous question, who's waving his hands. He said, we're very supportive of the Western Gateway and keen to be more involved. So there's a bit of a plug and a push.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, now next one is from Alex Diego. With regards to the Zero-E aircrafts, how long do you think it will be before these aircraft are up and flying commercially? And will the hydrogen used be sourced from sustainable sources or made using renewable energy?
A very fine bunch of questions there. Well, absolutely. We're very ambitious. We want to get it right, but we're firstly looking at the 100-seater side of the sector of the aircraft concepts that we've been looking at. And I was with our head of engineering from Filton site the other day, and he said, you know, we've got to move quickly. We've got to get people working. We've got to get this program properly launched. But Airbus haven't wanted to put sort of too many timetables. It can be a dangerous thing to do, but you know, we're very, very keen. We're looking maybe towards 2030 for some of these first developments to happen. In terms of hydrogen, we're in a very active part of the Hydrogen Council, which is a worldwide grouping of working with the energy sectors and many other people who are looking at hydrogen. And I know the UK are looking very avidly about hydrogen, also perhaps in the northeast of England. I'm keeping my Western Gateway beady eye on that, by the way, because there must be something we can do on hydrogen in our area. It's quite an exciting topic. Whether it will be sustainable or not, absolutely, I'm sure Airbus would absolutely want that to be the case, but lots of work being done on this at the moment.
Thank you. A question I have, Katherine, clearly the governments across the world have been faced with unprecedented challenges and decisions made because of the pandemic and what that has meant for your industry in particular, but it's impacted on everybody. Without putting you on the spot and trying to be too political, do you think there were any things that the governments could have done differently to try and ease the burden and challenges facing the industry?
Well, I wouldn't have wanted to be any of them. I think we all perhaps have to remember that we're all human beings, and we're doing the best they can. It was the duty of people like myself to make sure the government were aware of how acute the situation was becoming. We have benefited from the furlough scheme. We didn't furlough everybody, but a lot of people were furloughed. So we estimate that we've probably secured around £60 million worth of support from the government across our business and many of our supply chain. As mentioned, the ventilator challenge, that was really interesting to be part of. You know, we had Michael Gove, the Prime Minister, really focused. They realised there was a need for ventilators, so they really kicked that off. I have to say Airbus is a very internally quite a competitive company. This is no secret. So the French and German governments were quite quick coming up to the fore, making big announcements, and our government decided not to move or make announcements in that way. Now we'll wait to see what comes tomorrow with the comprehensive spending review. Research and technology is a big thing that we're saying invest in that more, because then it helps for the future. But the other key thing, and this is so important for the aerospace supply chain in Wales, is we have been asking for some more support for the supply chain for some of the smaller companies who need support. So I'm not going to comment too much about whether they've done a good job or not. All I would say is I'm glad I wasn't one of them, but my company and many of my people I work with in other parts of business have all done the best they can to ensure that people are aware of the challenges we've faced and how maybe they can be remedied.
Thank you for that honesty, Katherine. I've got, I think, time for one more question. And this is from Nick Speed. How does Katherine see the Western Gateway developing at a time when there's so much focus on the levelling up of the north of England? How do we compete with Greater Manchester and the West Midlands?
So I know I can't keep using this excuse, but we have only been going for a year and we've had this pandemic in between. But one of the first things I did when I was asked to take this on was to speak to the Northern Powerhouse and to speak to the Midlands Engine. And I've had nothing but support. The key thing is to look at what the strengths are of our different sectors. We've got great strengths in advanced manufacturing, in cyber, in digital, on the green economy. Let's build on that and then persuade the government to invest. And one of the key points, as well, as I mentioned earlier, is infrastructure, getting the right transportation, getting the new metro system in Newport, getting the metro bus system in Bristol. That's the kind of thing that businesses care about and will then invest in. It is going to be a bit of a job. There's a little bit of a joke I've heard from some businesses when they say we're all in the north now as a way of getting investment. Some parts of the Western Gateway are relatively affluent, but I know, and I've learnt a lot in the last year about some of the areas of deprivation, whether it be in some of the parts of South Bristol or even in some of the parts of Newport. And I see it's in the interest of working with our neighbours to help get more investment.
Well, Katherine, thank you very much indeed for your honesty and enlightening us, not only in terms of your journey starting off in the world of PR, but how you progressed through manufacturing and now involved with one of the leading aerospace businesses in the world. And I'm sure we're all reassured that you're actually fighting our corner in your role with the Western Gateway, and long may that continue. So whilst we're sadly not able to share time with you and dine and provide refreshments and mingle, hopefully that opportunity will arise when we get back to normal as a guest of ours, when perhaps you don't have to stand on the platform but can relax and listen to another speaker. So on behalf of the club, Katherine, many thanks indeed for your time, and to your team for making this happen. And I'm sure whilst we can't give a round of applause that you'll necessarily hear, we'd like to say thank you from the club. Moving on with just a notice now before we end, I'm delighted to announce that on Monday the 14th of December, the Right Honourable Simon Hart, Secretary of State for Wales, will be our guest, and he will be discussing the Brexit transition, the impact of COVID-19, the economic recovery and the renewal of Wales, and the most recent spending review. So details of that are now on the website, and we look forward to hopefully seeing most of you, and indeed any others, guests and friends that you can join us for the event. So on behalf of everybody again, Katherine, thank you very much and good evening.